I'm late getting started doing videos today, and I'm not starting with hockey. I'm starting with this. This is my wallet. Carry this everywhere. Um, it's Star Wars, of course. That's the Rebel logo. And since I was a little kid, before I was the hockey guy, I would have been the Star Wars kid. Before there was that kid with the lightsaber, the really weird kid doing the lightsaber dance. You know what I'm talking about. But there's always comparisons made between Star Trek and Star Wars. And then comments made about Force Awakens. It's just a rehash of Star Wars. Yeah, kinda, sorta, it is, and it has to be. So, Star Trek, we'll start with. You have the original cast for episodes 1 through 6. So those are 1 through 6 of the movies. I'm skipping the series altogether because all I'm talking about is the cinematic universe. At the end of part 6, they're sailing off into the second star to the right and straight on till morning. They're doing Peter Pan, and everything's great. Right? It's the perfect way to end it. So what did Star Trek do? They screwed it up. You come out with Generations, which is a giant piece of Nexus. Generations could have been good if only the Nexus made any bloody sense whatsoever, and if any of it made any... Just, wait, why are you getting out of the Nexus then? Why don't you get out before all the crap started and you could have saved billions of lives? Oh, right, because it's a stupid movie. Generations destroys things. Just so you have Picard and Kirk in the same movie, and it's garbage. Remember that. It's garbage. Then you have First Contact, which was pretty good if you ignored little things like paradoxes and whatnot. If you ignored paradoxes and things that don't make sense, it was a good movie. Ish. And then you have Insurrection, which was crap. Nemesis, more crap. And by the end of Nemesis, nobody cared if you ever saw a Star Trek movie again. So what did they do? They rebooted it. Of these 6 movies, we all agree Wrath of Khan was fantastic. We agree that Voyage Home was fun with the whales. Part 3, Search for Spock, depends who you ask. 6 was fantastic. So there's the evenly numbered movies are the good ones. So 2, 4, and 6. First Contact's technically 8. And then 10 was supposed to be a good one, but it was Nemesis and it was hot garbage. It was Tom Hardy playing a clone of Picard who was bald for no reason because Picard wasn't bald when he was younger. So it sucked. And it killed the franchise. Star Trek dies right here. J.J. Abrams comes in and says, alright, I can fix this. And it is reborn with Star Trek. Now, this is the polarizing moment where a lot of people don't like the movies. I did. I thought the new storyline was fantastic. So parallel universe, new storyline, new issues. Fine, everything's great. And then they did Into Darkness, which I've talked about on this channel before, and I loved it when I first saw it, and I agree now it's basically crap. And then they did Star Trek Beyond, which was... The new one was fantastic. It was fantastic. And nobody went to see it. So it was a flop. Star Trek right now, for all intents and purposes, every report I read, it's dead. Star Trek is dead. Okay? There's a new series, but the cinematic series is dead. What does Star Wars do? Well, first you have... the original, of course, Star Wars. Then you have Empire. We all agree that Empire is the best movie of all of them. Yes, we do. If you say it's Jedi, you're wrong. I used to say it was Jedi. Over the years, I've kind of got over some of the scenes in Jedi, and I kind of find it really cheesy. If I had to rate them, though, I would still rate it ahead of Star Wars. Star Wars was an iconic, mainstream, huge hit. Made, by today's standards, billions of dollars. Star Trek was a cult classic on television that became movies. That became movies because the TV series was well regarded. So it's always had the TV/movie thing with it. Star Wars never had that. Star Wars was this thing that was dreamed of by George Lucas and was always cinematic. It wasn't meant to be television. Yeah, they did the Star Wars Christmas special. You'll put your eyes out with needles if you watch it. I don't recommend it. But this was the end. Jedi was the end. 77, 80, 83. Jedi was it. Episode 6. Good guys win. Everything's fantastic. Books came out. The expanded universe became this thing. And the extended universe of both Star Trek and Star Wars is rich and it's kind of fantastic. But I've always had an easier time getting into the Star Wars extended universe than Star Trek. Star Trek's extended universe I've always found is kind of, you got to stick to somewhat the same plots. Star Wars, they go into really different areas. Depending on the author, you go into some fantastic storylines, which is why when George Lucas said, well, I'm ready to do it all over again, 1997, we all went, yay! And then we heard the title. We went, well, oh, okay. Phantom Menace. It doesn't sound like it fits into any of it. But it's episode 1, so it's going to be the genesis. It's going to show us how Obi-Wan became Obi-Wan. It's going to show us how Anakin fits into the universe. It's going to show us how everything started. And it really didn't. I mean, it tried to. But it was so sanitized. These movies were done mostly with real effects and not computers. This was computers. The funny thing is, Phantom Menace, according to George Lucas, was the way that he had wanted the original Star Wars movies to be. And he didn't have the technology to make it happen. If the original Star Wars had been what Phantom Menace was, the Star Wars phenomenon would not have happened as it did. Star Wars is a cultural phenomenon. Star Trek is cult classic. Cult following. Which is why the first Star Trek movie, everybody goes up to see it. It's like, oh yeah, I love Star Trek. Because, you know, your parents loved it, your grandparents loved it. Sure, we'll all go see Star Trek. And then Into the Darkness, they're like, oh, it's Khan, this is great. But then it didn't make any sense. And then the guy who played Khan was even less Khan-like than Ricardo Montalban. And then by that point, the new Star Trek, it didn't matter what it was. Because people were tired of Star Trek already. Star Trek has never been this cultural, iconic movie. Wrath of Khan was not anywhere near a Star Wars movie in terms of its income. Wrath of Khan had the greatest space battles in history because every single shot mattered, and I've talked about that in videos before too. Every single laser shot and photon torpedo, they all matter. Part 4 was fun, didn't make the kind of money Star Wars would, and Part 6 was just fantastic because it went back to the same writer as 2, the same creator. And because of that, Part 6 is also an actual movie that every shot's important. And then Generations, they blow up the ship and nobody cares. Nobody cared. They said, oh no, they've blown up the Enterprise. Again, it was, oh, well, they're crashing. That was kind of cool. And only when you think about it later do you realize how stupid it is. Up until Phantom Menace, The Empire Strikes Back, Return of the Jedi, Star Wars, they didn't really have that. They had the Ewoks. They did. And Jedi, there was a cop-out. There were 2 cop-outs. One, there was supposed to be 2 Death Stars instead of 1, which would make sense. The Empire would want to have more than 1 Death Star if they could. If they can build 2, they'd build 2 to destroy multiple worlds at once and make sure that the rebels can't target 1 target. 2, it was supposed to be on Kashyyyk, the home planet of the Wookiees. And we really wanted to see the home planet of the Wookiees, and instead we got teddy bears. But we forgave them, because the battles were kind of thrilling. Phantom Menace, there was nothing there. There's no character development. There was some cool outfits. Some of it kind of looked like Star Wars. It was mostly boring. And this started a tradition of that prequel trilogy of taking really good actors and making them boring. So they decided to double down on the boring and went with Attack of the Clones, which was a war between robots and clones. So it doesn't matter who dies. Look, it's a million different versions of Jango Fett, and Jango Fett can't hit the broadside of a barn door. Oh, this is great. Oh, look, robots are fighting with the Jangos. Yay. Oh, Django's got a clone. That's Boba Fett. Oh, Boba Fett's a clone. Oh. Everything we thought was cool about Boba Fett got destroyed in Attack of the Clones, and Disney's trying to restore it, but I'll get to that in a minute. Attack of the Clones was crap. I would even argue Clones was arguably worse than Menace, because Menace tried to do something and Clones tried to be Star Wars, and it wasn't at this level. You had Christopher Lee chewing up the scenery, as he does. And yet, it couldn't save that movie. Yoda fighting with a lightsaber was freaking hilarious. Probably not what you should feel when you're watching Yoda fight for his life. Isn't that funny? The little green guy's spinning around in circles. The whole thing of Empire was Yoda saying, hey, your Jedi weapon is not your strength. You are your own strength. Clone shows us, hey, he can spin around while he's holding a lightsaber. It's really fun. Really? They never get into any of the actual depth in this. They talk about Cypher Diaz. You never see him in the movies. Cypher Diaz? Yeah, who's Cypher Diaz? Never find out. Doesn't matter. What actually happens to start the Clone War? We don't know. Other than Jar Jar's an idiot. Me's a thinking you should give the power to Palpatine. Oh my god, you're retarded. Like, Clones takes anything here and just flushes it. So what did they do next? They went with Revenge of the Sith. And Revenge of the Sith was dark, and it was dark, and it was dark, and it was depressing, and it was stupid. Obi-Wan pretended he didn't know that Padme was pregnant. Awesome. What would have been better would have been Anakin being confronted by Obi-Wan. She's with child. What are you doing? How long have you been married? A scene between Anakin and Obi-Wan where Obi-Wan's like, look, I'll keep your secret, but if other Jedi are around Padme, they will sense that she is pregnant. They can sense that somebody died halfway across the galaxy. They can sense you got your belly kicked from the inside by a baby. Give me a break. So Revenge of the Sith takes whatever is left of this trilogy and whatever hope you have left and destroys it. And the first time you see it, you're not aware of it. The first time you see it, you're like, well, it was better than Menace. It's better than Clones. You're right. And it makes so much money. All of these monies, while we can agree that they're hot garbage, made more monies than anything on this side of the board. Other than maybe, I think Star Trek, the reboot, made more money. So after Revenge, Lucas goes, well, that's done. And Lucasfilm allows them to make the Clone Wars cartoons. The Clone Wars cartoons did something interesting. And I know I'm talking cinematic, but I want to mention cartoons for 1 second here, for one reason. The Clone Wars cartoons showed us that you could actually make those characters and those prequels interesting if George Lucas wasn't involved in the writing process. I think with George Lucas, he is so personally invested in his characters, and I get it. I totally get it. That he has it in his mind how they should act, how they should react, and what they should do, and how they should speak. The problem is, all 6 of these movies suffer from really, really poor dialogue. The dialogue in some of these Star Trek movies are fantastic because Star Trek is based on science and Star Wars is based on faith. They both have these space battles and they're both set in space, but Star Wars is about a religion, Star Trek is about science, war, and looking at who we are as humanity, and it's all introspective and it's very deep, which is why Nemesis was absolutely horrible. Insurrection would have been a half-decent episode of the television show, not a movie. And it's stupid. Oh, we have a youth formula. We can be youthful forever. We're not going to allow anybody else to share with us. Why not? If I had like 11 billion gallons of water that would make you feel youthful forever, why is it just mine? Other people should be allowed to share it. We should be allowed to or like look at it and figure out chemically how it works and make it so that other people can feel that way too. Although life would be hell. I think it would be hell. Oh, I've been around here for 800 years. We've been married for 780 years. Kill me, kill me, kill me, kill me, kill me, kill me, kill me. But that's the thing. These movies did their best to destroy Star Wars here without meaning to do it. They were well intended. George Lucas well intended these movies. And this was still cultural icons. Darth Maul, you still see Darth Maul everywhere, even though the movie he was in was hot garbage. In the Clone Wars, they recreated Darth Maul and made him really cool. So that when Star Wars Rebels came around and Darth Maul's in it, we all go, yes. And Star Wars Rebels has been simply a fantastic cartoon that fits into this universe. Whereas the TV and the movies of Star Trek don't really work together. The Picard of the movies is not the Picard of the TV series. Picard of the movies is fire, fire, fire. Oh, we're going to kill everybody. Oh, I'm so angry. And in the series was all, now, number one, we know we're angry. That creature may have destroyed an entire planet's civilization, but we need to understand why. Picard in the movies, he ruined my suit. I gotta kill him. The Star Wars Rebels cartoons, much like the Star Wars Clone Wars cartoons, showed us that this was the exception rather than the rule. Star Wars can still be a fantastic universe. Star Trek's in our universe in the future, which is a little less romantic because you're still in humanity, San Francisco, Paris, that kind of thing. This is a long time ago in a galaxy far, far away again. Religion, science. Religion, science. You look at where Star Trek is right now. It's a television series, online streaming through CBS, and honestly, compared to, say, this Star Trek or Wrath of Khan or Undiscovered Country, that's the word I'm looking for. Compared to those movies, the new Star Trek is just garbage. It's getting better, but it's still garbage. Whereas Star Wars on TV helped make this work again. So, the point of all this is simple. When Star Trek fell apart, what did they do? They rebooted it. So when Nemesis was crap and didn't make money, they rebooted it. Revenge of the Sith may have been crap, and it was the end of the saga for George Lucas, but it made a lot of money. And anytime somebody's going to make a lot of money, somebody's like, hey, we'll pay for that. So Disney said, how many billions do you want, George? And George's like, I don't know, 80. And they went, all right. He's like, really? Seriously? And then backed the truck up to his door. Force Awakens is born. And right away, Lucas is like, hey, you guys want to do 7, 8, and 9? Here's the treatments I had. Here's the idea I had for 7, 8, and 9. I've read speculation on what he wanted for 7, 8, and 9, and it was really uninteresting. It was the idea that there was a cult of Darth Vader that was risen from the Empire, and that this cult of Darth Vader was doing these weird terrorist runs around the galaxy in the name of Darth Vader, and I thought that's really not very interesting. Force Awakens is a reboot of Star Wars, but you can't reboot Star Wars. See, Star Trek, you can get away with it because these aren't cultural icons. James T. Kirk is not Luke Skywalker. James T. Kirk can be played by multiple actors. Even Spock, Leonard Nimoy, and God rest his soul, can be played by multiple actors. I'm waiting for Spock to show up in the new TV series, for instance. If they can recast Sarek twice, they can recast Spock twice. Bloody ridiculous. So, to me, recasting Luke Skywalker is impossible. Han Solo, impossible. These are cultural icons. Force Awakens comes out, and it's like, okay, we're going to touch on stuff that's similar to Star Wars because this movie's being made about 40 years after the original Star Wars. That's 2 generations later. Yes, people saw Revenge, Clones, Menace, yes. But they want to rope everybody in, which means they have to harken back to this. They have to. In terms of which ones are the best movies, 1, 2, 3. For me, Star Wars is 3rd, Revenge is 4th, Clones 5th, I guess, and Menace 6th, although you could interchange those two no problem. And that's before Force Awakens becomes a thing. So for me, the only reason Revenge is ahead of Clones and Menace is because they finally stopped with the crappy dialogue of Padme and Anakin being in love, which proved that George Lucas can't write dialogue between people who are actually in love. And that's not a big deal. There are other directors and writers who have a hard time with dialogue between characters. They're far better at action scenes or violence than they are with actual character development. Not everybody's Quentin Tarantino. And even Tarantino at times has too much character development, and then he makes up for it with seemingly over-the-top violence, and you're like, really? And that's what happens. Now, you're going into Force Awakens, you're like, okay, JJ, you got to bring this back. You brought back Star Trek. How are you going to bring back Star Wars? And his initial reaction probably would have been, start over? But if you restart Star Wars, you got to do Empire and Jedi all over again. And you got to deal with backlash the whole way. Because if you change anything, people are going to be like, well, that's not Star Wars. And if you leave it the same, people are going to say, well, you just remade Star Wars. That's easy. And that shot didn't look right, and that shot didn't look right. Who cares? So you have to remake Star Wars. You have to do something familiar with this without remaking it. So you take the Death Star and you make Starkiller Base, which is way larger. You turn the Rebels into the Resistance. You turn the Empire into the First Order. The Old Republic into the Republic, which was the New Republic. Instead of Alderaan, you blow up a bunch of Republic planets. So you change it. Because you have to. You can't recast Luke Skywalker, Han Solo, Princess Leia, Darth Vader. You just can't. That's why James Earl Jones is still doing the voiceovers anytime they do anything Darth Vader related. Because you can't change that voice. It's iconic. And Star Trek doesn't have that. I love the old Star Trek series as much as anybody else. They're not iconic characters. It's not the same. So today, The Last Jedi comes out. And I know it's got a 94%. I read a spoiler-free preview, and I'm very excited. Spoiler-free review, and I'm very excited. I'm very excited because this movie supposedly takes things in a completely different direction. Tomorrow morning, Yvonne and I are getting up. We're going to go to a theater. We're going to watch The Last Jedi. We're watching it in 3D. I'm getting ready to strap myself in and sit through 2.5 hours of awesome. The fact that I've read that this movie completely ruins and destroys this kind of movie, that they take it in a completely different direction, I love it. And it's what J.J. Abrams said they would do when they made Force Awakens. He said, we have to make a movie that's similar so that fans understand and trust us to make a Star Wars movie so the next movie can be something completely different in a completely different realm with completely different characters doing completely different things. You have to keep the humor because Star Wars has had humor all the way through. Funny humor, forced humor, and then funny humor again. Do you talk or do I talk? Who talks first? Do I? Little things. Listen up, big deal. Women can always smell out the truth. Or always find the truth. However it is Han says it. Did you just call me Solo? There's just little moments in there that make The Force Awakens funny. The surgeon, the doctor, she's working on Chewie's arm. She's like, oh, that sounds really dangerous. Oh, you must be so brave. And he's, oh, yeah. Like, you can hear him talking in Wookiees, but you know he's like, oh, yeah, you're right, I'm so brave. And it's a fun moment that doesn't detract from that movie. The jokes in Revenge of the Sith, Clones, and Phantom Menace were mostly awful. You cringe when you hear it. I hate sand. It gets everywhere. Ugh. It's awful. The Last Jedi is so important to me that I'm doing a video when I should be doing previews for tonight's games. It's what I do. It's what makes me money on YouTube. But The Last Jedi has been important to me since Empire. 1980. When Empire came out, maybe 7-year-old me, a little head, body, and legs, Fat legs, arms. And I was all like, yeah, I'll go see Star Wars. So I put my hand up like, yeah. I'm all excited. And we saw it as a double bill. We saw Star Wars, and then there was an intermission, and then we saw Empire. And 7-year-old me was caught up. 1980 is the year before I got into the NHL. And I have been a Star Wars fanatic since then. The books that I wrote for years were inspired by me seeing Star Wars and realizing this whole universe was possible. And I had seen Star Trek on television, and I'd never had that feeling watching Star Trek. I have people ask me, what do you like better, Star Trek or Star Wars? And I hedge. I hedge because of these movies. Because when I say, oh, I'm a Star Wars geek, people say, really, Phantom Menace? No. Not these three. No. These two and these three. And Star Wars Rebels, the series, which is simply fantastic. Rebels is so damn good that if they made movies out of Rebels, I'd be right there. They're a great addition to that universe. So there you go. For me, that's the difference between Star Trek and Star Wars. Star Wars has the iconic characters, the moments in my life that I've remembered beyond all else. Every one of these movies, all 7 of these, I've seen in the theater multiple times. Yeah. I watched Phantom Menace 4 times. I'm part of the problem. I'm part of the reason that movie made $400 million and made George Lucas go, I did really well. I'm part of the problem. I saw Clones twice, and I saw Revenge of the Sith 3 times because I thought that was the last time I was going to see Star Wars in the theater. Then they did the 3D treatment of Star Wars, and I saw that. And then they were going to bring out the 3D... Or no, they were going to do a 3D treatment. They did the... which revamped condition? They did the revamped movies, and I went out and saw... I saw Star Wars, I saw Jedi, and I missed Empire when they did the revamped re-release. And then they were going to do them all in 3D. And that was when Disney stepped in and went, no. Disney took over, and the first thing they did was take those 3D treatments of those movies and scrap them. Because they don't need to be in 3D. They're done. I've heard it said before that directors have an opinion that their movies are never finished, they're simply abandoned. They do as much as they can, and then they move on to something else, even though they're not 100% happy. Lucas clearly is a man who obsesses on every little detail in his movies, which is why when The Force Awakens came out, that's The Force, not A Force Awakens, The Force Awakens. Or I'll just put Force Awakens. When Force Awakens came out, he wasn't happy. To him, this was all about the Skywalker family, and 7, 8, and 9 were supposed to finish out that storyline. Disney looked at this and said, oh, we can tell a much bigger story. That's why there's rumors of a Yoda movie. There's, of course, the Han Solo movie, which has been in trouble. And a movie about Boba Fett. Because what Disney understands is they have many billions of dollars to make here, and the best thing they can do is take these 3 movies and forget they exist. Everything they're doing is meant to remind you of these 3 flicks, not these 3. Midichlorians? Never heard of them. Jar Jar Binks? What's a Jar Jar Binks? Naboo? Never heard of it. Disney will make movies every year until they have nothing else to make movies about with Star Wars. And it is literally a limitless universe they have to work with. So many good books. Star Trek always ends up being about the Klingons. I am sick of Klingons. Sick of it. Because I know from Star Trek The Next Generation series on television, you knew so much. There's so much exploring to do. There's so many things to do in the universe. There's so much more interesting than fighting with guys wearing prosthetics. It's embarrassing. At least with Disney, they appear to be ready to take that step and push the universe further and further open. And I know I've seen the criticisms of, oh, they put on all these new planets and blah, blah, blah. And it's just as boring. You got to expand the universe. It's a galaxy. It's not just 5 or 6 planets. You look at Phantom Menace for an example. You look at that Senate. Every single one of those spots in the Senate is a planet. It's huge. And yet, there's not a lot of growth in terms of where they're located in that second trilogy. And some of the planets are kind of eh. So yeah, I get it. Jakku is Tatooine. I totally get that. The fight at Starkiller Base looks a lot like Hoth. Get that too. The best part is, and I'll end with this. Rogue One, and I know Rogue One's a polarizing movie and not a lot of people like it. I get that. There's a lot of people don't like Rogue One in the fandom. I loved that movie. I've watched it 5 times. I've watched it 5 times because I keep thinking, all right, maybe people are right. Maybe this movie isn't very good. Maybe the characters are really, really forgettable. They're not. They're not. Now, I'm not a big fan of Cassian. Because to me, he's shooting and killing people for very little reason. And I don't like how they try to make him like Han Solo. So he's the one character I don't like. Everybody else I like quite a bit. And there are moments in that movie that are fantastic. And the battle in that movie is beautiful. And the Death Star is terrifying again. Tarkin, sure, he looks CGI. It's forgivable. Leia, not as much. That's an unforgivable one. It'll be interesting to see what more they come up with, but Rogue One was a fun movie. And I know I'm going to love The Last Jedi. So I'm not going to pay attention to the comment section on this video because I don't want spoilers. But I will say this. This movie's going to make a lot of money. And that's why Star Wars never got rebooted like Star Trek. You can't. You can't remake Star Wars. You can remake Star Trek over and over again. There's even rumors that they may try rebooting Star Trek in the theaters again. Not now, but soon. How many times have they rebooted Spider-Man? Yeah, you can reboot Star Trek. And it'll be fine. They can reboot Star Trek Next Generation in a movie form. And it'll probably work for that first movie or two. And then they'll start fighting Klingons again. No, not Romulans. Not the interesting aliens. Not the ones that actually have depth. Not Ferengi, who are kind of fun. Or Kardashians, who aren't just, a bunch of snobby sisters. They're actually kind of terrifying aliens, too. And then there's the ones in the movies. They will eventually try to resurrect this in the theaters. But it's a challenge. This is just making money. It has always been just making money. When I hear people complain that Disney's using this as a cash grab, and this is a cash grab, of course it is. They paid $1 billion for it. They're not going to pay billions of dollars for something and then go, oh, let's serve the fandom. No, they're going to look and say, how can we make the most money? That's what happens in Hollywood. It happens all the time. And it doesn't always work. Star Wars, that's a guaranteed work. It's going to work. They're picking the right directors. They're picking the right script writers. They're picking the right people. Because Disney knows they can't deliver this to a hack that directed a bunch of crappy directive DVD videos. Because if they do that, they're going to kill this legacy and they're going to kill their chance to make billions of dollars. So their motivation to make these movies good is also their motivation to make these movies moneymakers. Which is why there's always going to be some cute little creature they can make money off of. It was BB-8 in the last one, and this one's a little furry guy that's on the deck of the Millennium Falcon next to Chewie. There's always going to be that cutesy little thing to make money off of because kids are going to want one because they're cute. They're going to look a lot like Gizmo. It's part of that beast. It's sort of like when I watched Red Letter Media and they were complaining about the movie I reviewed last weekend, Disaster Artist, and said that it was not accurate. Well, of course not. If you make the Disaster Artist completely accurate, Tommy Wiseau becomes one of the worst assholes in the history of movies, and nobody's going to cheer for him or Greg Sestero. Nobody's going to care. You've taken a movie that can make a lot of money and just turned it into an artsy-fartsy movie. The Disaster Artist, as it stands, is mainstream movie. The movie that I always use for the example, and it's important too when you look at this, look at historical movies. Look at Braveheart. A lot of people love Braveheart. Braveheart is not historically accurate at all. There was a William Wallace. He helped Scotland gain freedom. It wasn't anything like the movie. It really wasn't. If history can be rewritten for movies and people like it, then people need to lighten the hell up about Star Wars. Lighten up. It's a movie about an invisible force that controls everything in the universe and people running around with laser swords fighting each other over who controls it. It is not something meant to be taken that bloody seriously. And as long as it's being treated with respect, and if it's not done with a bunch of CGI that's so fake that your eyeballs go, and I'm done. Brain shutting down. Which is what happened in Clones and Revenge of the Sith. And as long as you don't have some robot alien lizard that coughs and hacks like it's got some horrible illness, I still don't understand any of that. And just all of it. This trilogy was just, it didn't work. This does. So there you go. I was asked to do my own views on the Star Wars movies. I figured I'd throw Star Trek in because you know what? This is the debate people always have. Science, religion. And for some weird reason, I prefer the movies that are based on religion. Let me know what you guys think in the comment section below. Hit like and subscribe if you're browsing your way through. And thank you so much for watching. I will talk to you again soon.